All right, so here's the plan. I had hoped to do this last week, and obviously we couldn't do it last week, but we'll start. The elders are working on a project this year called, kind of loosely called the membership project. I'll kind of introduce it this morning, and we're going to revisit it a couple times throughout the year, but it's not going to be a continuous thing. We'll pop in on it here and there in between units of Bible study, okay? So, because it's just a good thing to do here and there. So we're going to, what I'd like to do is just introduce it to you this week, and then next week we'll start diving into Isaiah. I had asked a couple weeks ago what you wanted to look at, and Richard suggested Isaiah, and I thought, that's not a bad thing. Isaiah is actually kind of really cool. And the more I started looking at it, it's like, we could do Isaiah. That would be really cool. So we'll do Isaiah for a bunch of weeks. And then we'll come back to a membership project. And then we'll do something else, probably Daniel for a while. And then we'll do a membership project, week or two, that kind of stuff, okay? So that's the plan for into the summer, okay? So here's the membership project. And let me just show you what we have here. We've been talking about this, let me introduce this by saying, let's not get real excited about things, or let's just relax as we talk about this. How do we talk about, part one, how do we talk about family members or church members? This started because in January, every year in January, the Missouri Synod, of which we are a member, that's our church body, wants congregations to submit a statistical report summarizing our activities in the previous calendar year. They particularly want to know, who in each age group is in Sunday school, who's in church, how many, are baptized and so forth. It helps the Synod in our district to put numbers and quantities to various aspects of our ministry, including how we organize our districts and synods into circuits for voting at conventions. That sounds a little complex too, but Richard knows this, Cindy knows this, Pam will know this too, but here's what happens. When we get together at conventions, we're organized into circuits. We have 4 circuits in our district, and each of our circuits has representatives. So our congregation is represented at the convention by me and a lay delegate, Richard in the past, Cindy previously, Ray at this convention, okay? But as a circuit together of 15 to 20 congregations, we're then represented at the synodical convention. We'll be represented by 1 pastor and 1 lay delegate as a circuit together. So what defines a circuit? Well, the synodical bylaws tell us what's defined, how to define a circuit. 7 to 20 congregations and 1,500 to 12,000 members. Okay, so we have to have a pretty good idea as to how many people belong to each congregation. That's basically the idea there. Integrity probably demands that we report our statistics as honestly as possible. Okay, I say that because the first congregation I served, they had 2 sets of books. And one set was, these are our members, and the other set was, these are the numbers that we're telling district. Yeah, I don't know, that's a good idea.
Must have been Chicago.
It was Chicago.
Well, that's
Yeah. These statistical reports include questions about the number of communicant members and baptized members the congregation has. Those are the terms they use. In these reports, the Missouri Synod uses the word members for administrative purposes, as do most churches. So then the word defines things like who gets to vote on business. Okay, so we have a specific use for the word. We have voting members here. We have members of the congregation, but we have voting members. So when we have a voters meeting, those people who are voting members get to vote on things. Okay, so that's one thing. But members, in terms of synod at large, is used for administrative purposes. So when Cindy went to a district convention in Florida with me, she represented our congregation. She got to vote on things of the, on the business of the district for our congregation. These also things then help us to determine how many people are there for purposes of assessment. Okay, because what we do is, when there's a convention, each congregation has to ante up. Okay, because a convention costs money. Okay, so rather than saying, it's just easier for everybody to say, we got a little congregation here, and it's going to cost. We put all the money in a pool, and then everybody just kind of pays out the same kind of stuff. So it works out. So how many are there so who gets to vote, and how many are there for purposes of assessment? And these numbers are similar to census questions of how many people actually live in your house, regardless of how many people you consider to be members of your extended family. Okay? So that's what, when the synod asks us for members, that's an administrative thing. It's like the government saying, who actually lives in your house? Okay? But at Christ the King, over the years, it's like, we have people in our extended family, I think you'd probably agree, that there are people in the Christ the King extended family who don't live in the area, and yet they're always welcome whenever they show up. And, they show up, they come to communion, they don't even have to say, can we come to communion? They just show up, they come to communion, we baptize their babies, they're always welcome, they participate in our activities. We don't have anything here like annual membership dues, like you have in some organizations. We don't have anything like that. It's like they walk in the door and it's like, oh, hi, how are you? We haven't seen you in, whatever long, but you're part of the family. But they don't serve as officers in the congregation, and they don't vote at voters' meetings, but they're part of the family. Okay? And I don't even know what that means sometimes. How did they get to be part of the family? Because they're part of the family. How did that happen? I don't know. Because they're related to Larry. Katie and Riley walk in the door and they're part of the family. And it's okay. Right? I mean, no big deal. Okay, so that's what we do. Christ the King extended family may also, but they don't actually live at this address, okay? You know what I'm saying? We don't necessarily count them when we're saying, who we're going to assess for. Christ the King extended family may also include folks that we haven't seen for a number of years. And this is a difficulty. If we were to ask them, who's your pastor, they're going to say it's Pastor Cahill. And I'm going to say, I haven't seen him for 10 years. I'm going to say, but Pastor Cahill's my pastor. That's a head scratcher for me sometimes. Okay. But maybe they're part of the extended family also. Who are those guys? I don't know how to tell who they are sometimes. But I have an idea here and there. We'll talk about that. Anyway, earlier this year, the elders began reviewing a spreadsheet of members' names because, again, we got this thing from the synod. Who are your members? It's like, are you kidding me? Okay, so we began to ask questions like this, and we got really complex and complicated, and maybe we shouldn't even bother, but so questions like this. Are baptized members and communicant members, are these even biblical terms? Do we find those anywhere in the Bible? If not, where do they come from? And what I'd like to do is, as we go through this year, I said to the elders, let's work on this together. So let's not even answer these questions right now. Let's just put them out there right now. And as we go through this year, let's take this here and there, and let's maybe use this group as a focus group or a study group or whatever here and there. And as we think about these things, let's attempt to come up with some sorts of answers to these questions together with the Board of Elders, so that by the end of the year, maybe we can have some kinds of answers to some of these questions toward the end of this year. And then next year, when we fill out the statistical report, we have a better idea of what we're saying and what we're doing, and we can tell everybody, this is what we're doing. And if we do this, together with the council and the voters meeting and the whole congregation, we can say, this is what we've said throughout this year as to what we're doing. Who are members? Who are, what exactly does the family of Christ the King look like? Let's get a better grip on it. Okay, so where does the idea of baptized and communicant members, where does that come from if not from the Bible? Which of the folks on the various lists actually live at home at Christ the King? Okay, who actually lives here? Including those who are here, and we include everybody who's here every Sunday, give or take, which is pretty much you all. Okay, how about including those whom we haven't seen for quite some time, but still live in the area? And there's some of those. Are there other folks who actually live at home at Christ the King who should be included on the lists? And I haven't given you the lists yet. We'll do that eventually. But are there folks that you think is like, when you see them, say, hey, what about this guy? And we might say, yeah, they probably should still be on the list. Are there folks on the list that don't actually live at home at Christ the King, but we still consider them part of a family? I know this is it's going to get confusing real fast. I don't know how to answer these questions, though, other things. Are there some folks on the list who don't actually live at home at Christ the King, but we still consider them part of Christ the King's extended family? Let me just, just for the sake of argument, let me just say Nikki's family. Nikki and Thomas and Colin and Obi-Wan, all right? Let me just, yeah, that extended family, okay? They don't, but let's just use that as an example, okay? I think we consider them as part of Christ the King's extended family, even though they're not here, okay? So there's an example. Or are there people who consider themselves as part of Christ the King's extended family? I think there are, because there'll be ones who will say, if you say to them, who's your pastor? They'll say, it's Pastor Cahan. Well, okay. Maybe there's folks on the list whom we've lost track of to such a degree that they're like distant relatives, And then there are some folks who've officially settled into a new church home, maybe in a new geographic area. What used to happen is, we get somebody like, and we'll use our son Matt, for instance. Matt Cahill moves to New York City, and he gets into a new church, and he gets, either he asks, or I say, I'm going to send you a letter of transfer to a church in that area. We transfer membership. That's an administrative thing, okay? We transfer membership from our church to Emmaus Lutheran Church in Queens, and that's what we did for Matt. That's the administrative thing. Either he asks or we. Hardly anybody does that anymore.
Really?
Oh yeah, hardly anybody does that. They just kind of move, and it's like, you did. Charlotte did. And you guys did. Well, you're old-fashioned.
We did.
Maybe a lot of people don't realize they have to do that.
Or just old. Some people don't realize they should do that.
And they don't know that.
And it's an administrative thing. And some people just like, well, you know, but it's a lot of things but there people don't do a lot of things that they should do because they just, you know, I mean, there's a lot of people that we've had throughout the years who, I mean, if they're gonna wait for 10 years to baptize their kid until they decide to get around to it, I'm not real surprised that they're potting around waiting to transfer their membership.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, what can I tell you? That's what happened when the Cub Scouts came here, you know? When we got the Cub Scouts, all of a sudden there were a number of Cub Scout families who were like, oh, you know what, we never had the kids baptized, maybe we should do that. All of a sudden, we baptized several Cub Scouts, and there were several other Catholic Cub Scouts that got baptized in the process at Catholic churches, you know? Because the family said, oh, yeah, you know what, we should have the kids baptized. It was like, fine, you know? Because they moved out from Cleveland and they never got settled in, and they finally did. But, you know. And so how do we find out who those folks are? That's why this is not going to be an easy process. This is just like, how do we find out who these folks are? Who are we actually talking about? You know, and there are some folks who, you know, who actually live close by in the area whom we hardly ever see. You know, and we know who some of those are. And there are some of those who we're related to and some of them who we love dearly. And oh my gosh. And then there's some we never see. So anyway, part 2. The reaching out process. The Board of Elders have started to talk about how do we reach out within our Christ the King family to clarify who actually lives in our house. Part of the process has to include conversations with individuals and families in the congregation, as well as focus groups in adult Bible class for input and suggestions. So we'll be asking you, we'll be asking other focus groups, we'll be asking families and so forth. Maybe we'll just have quiet conversations here and there with some families too. Already had one conversation with one individual who has several different adult children and said, here's what we're doing. Let me ask you about some of your adult kids. What do you think? And I was immediately told, yeah, you could take that one off, and that one never was, but leave those two, because, you know, if you ask them, they would say, you know, Pastor Cahill is my pastor. Like, okay. You know, I would have never thought that because I haven't actually seen those two in church in years, but, you know, I said, no, Pastor Cahill's my pastor. Okay. All right, so we're going to be spending a year talking to a lot of people about talking to a lot of people about a lot of people. And there might be some of you all too to say, who are some of the folks you know, and how do they feel about Christ the King and their relationship to Christ the King? All right, so part 3, how do we talk about actives and inactives? And that'll be a Bible study unit. That'll be definitely a unit that we do here. That's a word we used to, you know, those are words we used to use, you know, the actives and inactives. And gosh, I really hate those words these days. There was a point in time where the stewardship department wanted to know who the active members and who the inactive members were. And I told Pastor Soltis for many years, I'm not telling you those numbers. And every once in a while, Betty Ola forgets and she fills it out anyway. Said, don't do that. Don't give him that information. Why? I said, because for a long time we've had people here who have been members but have been inactive, and we've had people here who have not been members but been way more active than people who are members. And so we have people who have similar levels of activity. I don't even know what that means. What does it mean? I don't know what that means. We have similar levels of activity in the church, whether or not they're officially considered communicant members. We have people who've never officially become members of the church who are considerably more active in the congregation than some have become communicant members. That's why we need to do this as a whole unit. okay? We need to talk about these folks. And what does it actually mean? We have some communicant members who are 100% faithful on their chosen level of activity, however minimal. For instance, they attend worship only on Christmas Eve and Easter. But they are here 100% of the time on Christmas Eve and Easter. I'm not even here 100% of the time, as you knew if you were here last week. So all of this begs that we need to have a conversation like, should there be these kinds of distinctions, active and inactive members? And what kinds of distinctions are helpful, if any, without being belittling? Or maybe we just don't even bother with distinctions. Is it possible, and Wayne suggests, Wayne Giesler was the one who asked this question, I think it's a good question. Is it possible that the way membership and these kinds of terms are used for administrative purposes turns out to be not very pastoral?
That's really possible.
Yeah, I think that's the question. I think that's the key question. We use these things for administrative purposes, and they turn out to be not very pastoral after all. But we're going to do this as a Bible study later on. And here's another Bible study unit later on, because this is another one that we used to always jump to. What do we do with things like church discipline? Okay, and the so-called excommunication. Okay, this is an area which we need a whole Bible study because there's a lot of misunderstanding and suspicion and fear with regard to this. Are there times when church discipline is needed, and if so, when? In terms of clear sin and unrepentance. And when does excommunication actually indicate it? Okay. And I'm going to tell you, very extremely rarely, but it should be used, I think.
Oh, I got a question about it. Is there some kind of a ritual that you guys go through? Now, the Roman Catholic Church, I was reading in the medieval days how they would do excommunication. The Pope would get the person's name, turn it, light it on fire, and then they would stamp on it.
Well,
Do you guys have like a ritual to do that, or do you just say, don't come back?
We have a big bonfire.
Do you? You have a big bonfire?
Yeah,
Okay.
hot dogs.
Hot dogs? Roast marshmallows too, huh? What, you got it in here?
I don't think so. Well, I don't think it's in here. No, it's not in the hymnal, but there probably is one. But it's not, lighting names on fire and that kind of stuff. But there is probably a rite or rite of excommunication, and I'm saying that because I'm pretty sure that there is also a rite for reinstatement of membership. There probably is, we should do this when we do the Bible study. We'll do it as a Bible study, just about what we would do. There probably is a thing that says, if it comes to it where we have to do a public pronouncement that such and such a person, I'll use my favorite Slovak, Yaroslav Neposlušný, which means Yaroslav the disobedient. Okay, we have, Yaroslav Neposlušný has become so disobedient and sinful that we have no recourse as a Christian congregation except to say we exclude him from the sacrament for a period of time until he repents. Then it becomes necessary for the pastor, upon the approval of the council and the elders and so forth, to stand up in front of the congregation and say, Yaroslav Neposlušný will no longer be allowed to receive the Holy Sacrament of this congregation until such time as he repents. Then there is I'm saying that because I know there is a place and a right in one of the books for reinstatement of membership after repentance. So Yaroslav comes back to the pastor sometime later after a period of time, repentance and whatnot, and repentance and confesses, and the pastor is able to stand up in front of the congregation and say, it is with great joy that I am able to say to you that Yaroslav Neposlušný has repented of the sin for which he was previously excluded from communion, and he has been forgiven by the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and we now welcome him back into the membership of the Christ table, and in that. And both of those are public, so that everybody knows that, both of those are public things, so that there's no question about why Yaroslav is not taking the Lord's Supper, and there's no question about why he's back. I mean, it's all open and above board. It's no, like, fake news kind of stuff. Okay. But when we do that Bible study, I'll bring those out so you can see what the rituals are. There are rituals to do that. Yeah, but those only in really extreme cases.
Which is curious.
Yeah. And Lutherans have not ever thought about using the idea of excommunication in quite the same way as the popes of the Middle Ages did. The popes of the Middle Ages pretty much were like, okay, you don't like what I'm doing, you're going straight to hell, get out. It's just, Lutherans just never wanted to do that.
I think Leo X, he did that to Martin Luther.
Yeah, he did that to Luther, and it was like,
So,
yeah. We really need to have that whole conversation in the context of a conversation about reconciliation. What do we do in terms of conflict and reconciliation and those kind of things? Because that should be really used as a tool to try to bring about reconciliation rather than as a door slam. But yeah, that's a good question. And there is one, but it's not in that hymnal because we should really not use it very often. Okay. All right, but that'll be another total unit. It might be a 2-week unit, but we'll do that another time. Part 5, how do we talk about membership and definitions? A lot of this is like stuff that, okay. Pastor Cahill's opinion is that integrity demands that we report our membership numbers as honestly as possible. So what does membership mean as an administrative term? You know, I've been doing this for almost 40 years. What is this, 2018? I've been doing this since 1980. And it's just been on my nerves the whole time. I mean, you know, when I started in 1980 at Trinity in Chicago, and it wasn't a Chicago thing, it was just the church, I guess. The pastor had been there for 38 years, and I mean, I understand what they did. He'd been there for 38 years, and they had a whole, you know, they had their members on index cards. Sometimes he would just kind of quietly move somebody's card, the index card, from the active to the inactive file. You know, and I don't know what the criterion was that he used. Maybe it was like, I haven't seen him in 5 years, I'll just move it over there. And after he retired, when I was there for a little while, I got a phone call from somebody. So I want to get married there, I'm a member of the church. See, because that's part of the deal, right? You know, membership hath its privileges. Like, you get to get married in the church, you don't have to pay for it. So, and it was a bigger building than this is, you know, so that's the deal. You get the venue for free, right? And couldn't find this guy's name on the list anywhere. And I said to the secretary, I said, you know this guy? She said, I don't know this guy. So we looked through the thing. Turns out his name was in an inactive file, and I said, inactive. So then there was a little brouhaha about that. And then we went through the file, and we're like, oh my gosh, there's all these people that we don't know anything about. What with the elders? And like, we don't know anything about all these people. You know. And we went through the membership list, and there's a whole bunch of people on the membership list that the elders didn't know who they were. So why? How do you guys not know who these people are? Well, we don't know. And then there's all these people that were in the inactive file, and they said, how'd they get in the inactive file? And the elders like, we don't know how they got there. We think Pastor Kruger just probably said, yeah, they haven't been here in a while. We'll just, it's like, you know. At least when I worked for the Greek priest in St. Louis, he would look at a guy and go, he hasn't paid his dues this year, put him over there. You know? They had dues at the Greek church, you know, in the Lutheran church we don't have dues. So it's like, oh my gosh. So then we start looking at the list, and there's people on the active list who were dead. Now that's Chicago. So we pull these people out of there.
Were they voting?
You know, I don't know if they were voting, but we pull these people out of there. And then we published this list of people that nobody knew who they were. The secretary didn't know who they were. The elders didn't know who they were. We published this list in a newsletter. Who are all these people? If you know who they are, let us know. Well, then we get this letter from the previous pastor blasting me and the elders for maligning his ministry because, you know, we didn't know who all these people were. It was like, well, you know, I'm sorry, but you left me with this administrative mess here. It was like, and every year we get the same deal from Synod, you know, who are your members, who are not your members, and whatnot. And it's like, you know, I'm going to leave the next guy with the same administrative mess. We're going to try and make it not as, you know, at least tidier, but, you know, I think we need to have some kind of deal, understanding amongst all of us that says, this is what the family here looks like. This is what we understand when we say the people here at Christ the King. You know, whether it's the administrative numbers, you know, the administrative portion looks like that. The family looks like this. And it maybe is two different things. Okay? And maybe we have to be satisfied with that. Okay? But I don't know what that's going to mean. So what is membership going to mean? I don't know. What does it mean as an administrative term? We need to know what membership looks like for assessments and conventions and statistics. So we need to define, we need to have definitions of voting membership. We already have that in the congregational bylaws. Maybe we need to define communicant membership, something more than people who are allowed to receive a Holy Communion. So that's TBD. Baptized membership, people who have received the sacrament of holy baptism, that's also TBD. I mean, you know, theoretically, anytime somebody gets baptized here, they become a baptized member. Well, yeah, that's okay, but we've got a number of people on the list who have been baptized here, but they're, you know, God knows where they are. I don't know where they are, in the, you know, geographically speaking. I don't know where they are. You know, I baptized them 26 years ago, and they've moved. And I don't even know where they are in the world. You know, I don't know how to think about that anymore. What are the rights and privileges of members? So we need to look at bylaws. How do people become members at Christ the King anyway? So here's how you become members. You become baptized members, this is the process. This is the process of how you become communicant members, at least right now, and this is how you become voting members. Maybe we'll review some of those things. These things probably will need to be reviewed by council, elders, voters. Back page, part 6, a possible course for congregational study. As a congregation, we study all these topics, and we'll define some terms, I hope. We'll do some things here in Bible class, maybe we'll have some other focus groups. Elders will reach out, we'll have some one-on-one conversations. Maybe we'll come up with some new terms and some new definitions. Some of the goals, by January of 2019, hopefully we'll have a new understanding. What does it mean when we talk about the Christ the King family? What will it mean when we talk about communicant members, voting members, baptized members, membership transfer, church discipline, and excommunication? And we'll have a more clear status of the folks we were concerned about in January, because there were a number of those. What do we do with some of these folks on the lists? And a more accurate reporting of baptized and communicant members for the Missouri Synod and the district. So it'll be a longer process. And we'd appreciate your help and your input, your questions, and your considerations. And our goal is not to hurt anybody or to trample feelings, although I think that probably it's likely that feathers will get ruffled here and there along the way. I don't think we can help that. But we don't want to do it intentionally. What we want to do is try and get some clarity. Because we just want everybody to know that we love them, and we just want to make sure that we all got a better idea what's going on amongst us. So do you have any questions or comments or thoughts about this right at this point?
Well, I got a question.
Uh-huh.
Is there like a certain number of members that is declared a church? Like, let's say if you don't meet 50 people, you're no longer a church. I think when I was the delegate, we had about 150
Yeah.
in this church. Now, if our decline of membership would like hit a certain level, like, let's say it would drop for unknown reasons to 20 or some other number, would the Lutheran SCLE consider it? No, you're no longer a church. Although your members will have to go to other churches. Does it work like that, or does it? I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, Richard. Can I take some time to answer that? I mean, does anybody else have any other questions that you want answered? Because I think it's a really good question to ask. Because if not, I'll take the rest of the time to answer it. Okay. The way it works in the Missouri Synod is this. There is not a minimum number of members there is not a minimum number of members for a congregation. Okay? So I know that in some systems, like there are, but in the Missouri Synod there is not a minimum number of members of congregation. Okay? What we generally have, and part of that is in the Missouri Synod, the Synod and the district, let me say it this way, the congregation is the thing. Okay? The Synod and the district are pretty much advisory. They're advisory, they're not necessarily supervisory to the congregation. They're supervisory in terms of doctrine, but they're advisory in terms of administration to the congregation. And that means this. As opposed to, say, the Catholic Church, the district cannot close a congregation.
Oh,
Okay? This building and the congregation are independent of the district in terms of the administration. We own our own building, we pay our own bills, we do our own thing, we are totally, a totally separate business entity from the district. As opposed to, say, in the Catholic Church, where a congregation is part of the business operation of the district, of the diocese. So the diocese actually has a business supervision over the congregation. So if the diocese says you're closing, you're closing. It doesn't work that way in our system, in our Missouri Synod system. Okay? So what generally happens is the district has theological supervision over the congregation, but not business supervision. Okay, so the congregation can keep on going as long as they can pay the bills. Okay, and generally that's a lot of times what happens, is you have congregations, Lutheran congregations that get to be the point where they're so small, where they have a half a dozen people, and as long as they can keep the lights on and pay a preacher, they keep going. Okay, which sometimes gets very frustrating to the district, you know, because it's like, you know, guys, why are you doing this? You know, because we've been here since, you know, church. Yeah, because it's a church, and we've been here since Noah was a pup, you know, and we're going to keep on doing that. And it's like, you know, and then somebody dies and leaves the church $500,000, and it's like we can go on forever, and in that district it's like, oh gosh, come on. We can use that money elsewhere, you know, what they're doing. Okay, and sometimes it doesn't work out that way. You know, so it's always a difficulty to get a tiny little congregation to be able to say, well, what are the alternatives? Sometimes tiny little congregations can be persuaded to join up with other little congregations, to merge with them, become one, to double up with them so that they share a pastor, you know, that kind of stuff. You know, but no, there's no minimal size for a congregation. It's very, very hard. You know, there are a number of congregations that really, gosh, in some respects, you know, you look at them and go, we ought to really convert this into a hospice ministry. And just kind of let this congregation, you know, and I've said this about some of our churches. We ought to say to these churches, you know what? Here we are, Easter of 2018. You guys have had a good run. Spend the next year celebrating all the good stuff you've done over the next year. But Easter of 2019, make that your celebration, make that your bang up, end up service, and shut the doors and lock them for good. Just do that. You know, and shut it down. and it's never gonna happen. They're just gonna keep at it.
That would be a much happier way to have that happen.
It'll be a much happier way to have that happen, you know, but
The
there are,
church we belonged to before we came here closed.
yeah,
We went up for the decommissioning of the building, and it was very sad. It was
Yeah.
to see that happen.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't let go.
yeah, when people can't let go, that's a difficult, you know. We had a church in Joliet, Illinois, that was like that, and it was like, people were so stubborn. I'm gonna be the last guy out of this building, you know, if they carry me out. It was like, we're fighting about leaving the building. It was like, you gotta be, you know. On the other hand, you never know. You know, we have this tiny little church in Pleasant City. It's the one and only church in that, it's the one and only Missouri Synod church in that whole quadrant of Oregon. They have maybe 20 people that come to church. It's the one that we go down to. Pastor's River. Used to have 700 people there in its heyday. And Pleasant City down there was a coal mining area. Its heyday, there were 3 Slovak churches of the SLC district. They all had at least 500 people in those churches. And then the mines shut down and they all went elsewhere. They all came to Lorraine to work in the mills. You know what happened there. But they have 20 people in this one remaining church. And just a tiny little church. Doesn't seem like there's much left of it, but they keep on going. They pay the bills. The pastors come every other Sunday to do communion. They're wonderful people. And they're a bunch of, some of them are older people, but they open the doors every summer for youth groups to come in and do servant events down there. And the social worker from Lutheran Social Services down there, you know, she arranges servant events and whatnot. They've got 5 or 6 servant events. They go in there, the kids sleep on the floor in the parish hall. They go out in the community, they do stuff. They have a great relationship with Lutheran Social Services. They probably have a better outreach mindset in that tiny little congregation than some congregations that are 10 times their size. You know, they're just like, oh yeah, that's what we do. So you just never know. You just never know. And then there's some congregations that you look at them and go, you guys really need a kick in the pants, you know, to do something. But yeah, it can be very frustrating. Because there are sometimes where the district wants to say, I wish we could do something, and we can't. But yeah, the flip side of that is no, there is no minimum size. As long as you can pay the bills, you can keep going. And God doesn't always solve the problem with a lightning strike. Okay? All right. Good. If that's it, then let's pray and try to have a good week. Lord Jesus, thank you for your mercy and your grace toward all of us and for making us part of your family. You have called us your children, and that is in fact what we are, and we thank you for that. We thank you for making us your children and your family here in this place, a small part of heaven. And we praise you for that. We pray that you continue to bless us throughout this week in all that we would like to do for you and in all that you call us to do. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, thanks everybody.